Ladies and gentlemen, today's featured segment is presented to you by Radioactive Redhead. From Book 5 of the Warlock series, this week's reading is a compilation of excerpts outlining various action sequences after the breadth of a much larger strategy is detailed earlier in the book. Although these are other action sequences in the full text of the novel, these chosen scenes are offered to provide the listener a glimpse of the complexity of the greater plan. Chapter 11, Section 3. He had been in the target area casing the layout for months, scoping a little here, a little there, the only disagreement with the assignment being his bowel's reaction to the intensity of the local curry. Observation and strict detailing of movements and patterns had been his only distraction to the call of the toilet. Had he been given the go, he could have relieved himself of his gastronomical miseries several weeks ago. His quarry's habits were that ingrained in his retirement. Always the same, he observed his preys march along the shore with hands clasped behind, slowly musing en route to the iconic gateway of India Stone Arch, which had been built by the British Raj in 1924. The target was the former Minister of State for External Affairs, Subramaniam Jaishankar. The former minister had been the architect of India's funding the disruptive Chabahar port. At this range, Dogma couldn't miss. Prone, behind a sandbagged and scoped rifle, he pulled the trigger. Brains exiting the gaping hole in large scoops of mushed gray tissue, Jaishankar's limp body dropped like stone. Waves of distrust pulsed across the Arabian Sea and were found lodged somewhere just short of the Gulf of Oman. Chapter 11, Section 5. Offshore, the CCA's diesel gently lumbered as the pointy end pierced through the gentle swells. Elaborate recognition signals had been devised. The procedures would be followed, surely, but they were hardly necessary. This particular CCA had on board the Fleur 3 with MSX, which possessed edge tracing image enhancement technology. In short, the helmsman or boat commander could see just as well as in daylight, and the tiny scrap of infrared glint tape pinned to Hawks's right shoulder was easily identified inbound from over half a mile away. With little fanfare, the package was winched up and strapped down onto the flatbed. There was no activity along the shore in the pitch black of night. The boat crew shoved off, turned about, and majestically headed out to its loiter point, knowing the stealth technology impregnated into the hull's composite material warded off detection. Goose and Ox headed back to cars. Chapter 13, Section 2. With a warlock override on any competing tasking, that night the Sentinel flew over the stark desert region of Iran where the IRGC did its testing. With the magic of modern IP network communications, Emerson had a live feed on her desktop. The Sentinel's loiter time was not infinite, but sufficient for Obelisk, Emerson, and the 7-month pregnant Coco to watch live the launch of the Shahab 3 missile. Analysts at NRO also saw the launch plume on an infrared satellite sensor, the kind not available on Google Earth. A different signet bird caught all the radio telemetry commands, a feed available on C1, but too technical in nature for Emerson to analyze in real time. Emerson typed a command on her keyboard. The missile veered crazily to the south and earthward, impact into the hard-packed sands of the desert reported by the cloud of expanding dust. All this recorded on a hard drive buried within the fuselage, the Sentinel banked towards its home on K2. Emerson wore a tired but elated grimace of victory. Chapter 14, Section 1. Captain Jennifer Fields did now what she was born to do: to pilot a drone on a combat mission in a denied area. No more dilly-dallying, it was time to fly. Directly, Mojo told her the target: any Russian vehicle you can hit along the Zangezur corridor using all 4 MAML GPS-guided air-to-ground missiles, then turn to the east and drop the drone into the Caspian Sea. She had known the target was something big. Eyes wide, she digested the enormity of the outcome of what she was about to do. For Erdogan to do something inflammatory was not out of the realm of possibility. Iran would conclude Erdogan was feeling his oats. That is why the warlock and his Israeli partners had selected the Turkish-manufactured Bayraktar TB2 drone with its distinctive inverse V-tail structure. That is why the warlock had selected a launch site from within Turkey, where Jennifer now controlled the launch of the platform with the airfields at Kars. From the airfield at Kars, when she popped up to an altitude at which Iranian radar could track, the origination of the flight would be sourced to Turkey. At this flashpoint of tinder upon the success of the Zephyr was poised, Jennifer guided the TB2 in its bomb release run. All radars trained on this intrusion assumed that Turkey had no hostile intent. They were just observing that things would not get out of hand. As a potential hostile act, regardless of whose airspace, the TB2 was dismissed. The West Camfleur camera ball whirled to point at, identify, and target a Russian 122mm howitzer D-30. Jennifer immediately launched a missile and watched the devastation unfold. With rapid succession, she fired at 2 separate T-72 tanks, each buried in defilade position and oriented towards Iran. Most of the equipment was show of force for the purpose of peacekeeping and maintaining stability along the Zangezur corridor. The TB2 continued on its run heading east, the last MAML missile hanging from its attachment point under the wing. Jennifer did not have time to locate another target. From a position within Armenia, a Soviet-made 23mm caliber quad cannon ZSU-23 hammered a withering barrage of fire. The TB2 took rounds, its iconic inverted V-tail perforated, the drone plummeting to the earth without a sound. The carnage along the Zangezur corridor was not one of equipment or lives lost, but one of pointing fingers and distrust. If this preview broadcast has piqued your curiosity, the book in its entirety will be available for purchase from Amazon.com. Simply search The Zangezur Campaign by Mike Bennett and peruse the catalog of his latest works. Be sure to tune in to Radioactive Redhead to hear further excerpts from the Warlock series. This concludes today's featured segment from Radioactive Redhead. May your days be filled with good memories and laughter, and God bless.